Hello. I'm not going to tell you my story because I want to tell you the story of the field, but I will tell you a few little things. My whole life, I've been interested in truth. What is truth? The context of my life has been connection. I mean, that you could have written those for me. I grew up in a family. I was the eldest of 23 cousins. My mum was one of 9. We were a tribe. So connection. And the third thing is I like it real. I like it real. Yeah, my parents were Dutch. I'm born in Australia. We tell it like it is. We like it real. So those things are really at the center of, my experience of life and my interest. And then there's this fourth thing, which became my career, is how you make things easy. So I used to be in IBM, I used to do process improvement. If there's a mess up in the airport and they're in the wrong queue, I go, if we just did it like that, it'd work better. So, I've been always kind of trying to make things easy. And then I became a coach and a leadership coach, and that's what I do. That's one part of my career. 25 years I've been doing that. And then I came across the principles. And it was hard to find out anything about them 6 years ago. And it was hard to work out what they were or how to talk about them. It was hard to find things. And I thought that should be easier. So that's what this is about. I want to make it easy for anyone who wants to share truth to do that. That's why I exist, I think. So, you want to find out what I've been doing for the last few years? Here it is. So, John Scott needs a shout out because I could not have done this without him. He is a rock star. He's part of my gang. He's got a gang. He's in it. And you'll hear from him last. Because John Scott helped me know what I was really up to. So, the principles impact everybody in any field, in any situation, whether it's your health, mental health and well-being, whether it's performance on the pitch, whether it's sports performance or business performance, whether it's relationships, parenting, husbands, wives, children, or out there in the system where we think it's impossible because it's too hard, there's too much endemic, there's too much history, there's too much story. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to give you some facts and some information to help you. And I don't know if it's okay with Liz and Scott, but you can have this presentation and give it to anyone you want. It's fine. And you'll remember this because you'll want it later. So I did a bit of work a year ago on behalf of the community, because we were going for a £100 million grant, the MacArthur grant. It's a US grant. And a gang of us who had the knowledge, between us everybody, pulled together an estimate of what we think about the field. We think there's at least 5,000 practitioners, and many are transitioning from the fields of coaching, psychiatry, psychology, therapy and counselling. Why? Because it works better. I was one of them. 20 years. My mentor, Kathy Casey, said, it's harder for you. You already know something. So it takes something. It's looking in a different direction to what we've been trained to do. Therefore, there's a 500% growth in the field in the past 5 years. That's growing. Your evidence. You filled a room. That did not happen. I think the first conference was 75 people in the principles. It's like 7 years ago in the UK. You may or may not know this, there's over 100 books published, 10 of which were bestsellers. You might have heard of Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. Richard Carlson, a principles-based book from 20 years ago. Recently, you probably heard of Inside Out Revolution. You might have heard of Clarity and Results if you've had anything contact with Jamie. Instant Motivation is another book. There are more, but I'll point you to where you can find out all about that. And you may not know that there are at least 15 published academic research standard papers. Now, I'm really sorry to say this, I have actually read them. You don't want to do that. I've done it for you. okay? It's not happening yet, but it will happen, where we'll be able to give you that information in a more palatable format so that you can share it easily. But I've done a little bit of work for you. We think over 1 million people have been impacted in all these different fields. It's an estimate. But you impact one person, you impact everyone in their life, right? Okay, so now for some information. Here's an incredible story. Beyond Recovery worked with 90 prisoners run by Jacqueline Hollows. She just followed an intuition. She just was in a park and she followed an intuition. And then 2 years later, she has worked with 90 prisoners and she's academically researched it. And she has, now I'm just going to say, when I started looking at the principles, I want to know where's the worst case scenario and does it work there? Like a detective, right? And I'd say in prison, you've probably got the worst case scenarios. You're going to have trauma, you're going to have addiction, you're going to have abuse, you're going to have terrible backgrounds, you're going to have circumstances, aren't you? You're going to have it's all going to be in prison. So if it works in prison, it must be you're onto something. They did a control group, people who were taught the principles understanding and people who weren't. 5 times greater well-being against an internationally recognised well-being scale in the group that were taught the principles in prison. They're in prison. Purpose in life. I mean, you're in prison, but their purpose in life shot up. Depression, anger, and anxiety. These are all recognised international standard instruments that would be recognised by any board. 10 times reduction in the group that learnt the principles. That's data. You can have this. But that doesn't mean nothing to me, because for me it's in the stories. It's in the real human stories that we've been touched by today. And what I'm creating with the Real Change, it's a charity, it's a community enterprise. It's, nobody gets rich, that's for sure. This is a service to the community, and what we're doing is we're creating stories in bite-sized chunks so that you can share them easily with people. We want to meet people where they are. They don't care about the principles. They care about that they've got an alcoholic mum, or they don't know what to do with their sister because she's got bulimia. That's what they care about, and they want hope. That's what this is. Stories and statistics of hope. Here's Sally's story.
Worked in science for 35 years until my alcohol addiction started to control my life. I was very apprehensive, anxious child. I was a heavy social drinker. I can only see now that I was always trying to fix a feeling. I went to 8 treatment centres. I was introduced to a lady called Jacqueline Hollows, and I suddenly realised that it was so simple. I wasn't addicted to alcohol, I was addicted to trying to fix myself. And I thought I was broken. And the most amazing thing is I don't even think about a drink. The first time in my life, I can honestly say I'm happy with me.
Incredible story. So, we're gonna make those stories available to you in 1 minute, 5 minute, and 18-minute versions, depending on how you like your information, or written as an article, or as a podcast, because get with the kids. So, research on resiliency in a major US health clinic. I try to keep it. There's one old piece of research, but I've tried to keep the rest as current as possible, recent. This was done by Keith Blevins and Joe Bailey. We're not allowed legally to name the place, but let's just say it was a major healthcare organization in the US. If any of you work in any kind of systemic, you'll know that stress and burnout is very common, especially if you're in a caring profession. Okay, this was the results. They taught a particular way. They taught 100% paradigm, inside-out paradigm. It's a particular way of teaching the principles, and they always ask me to say that when I represent the data because it's particular. It's a paradigm shift in thinking. 85% increase. This is academically researched. Increase in their resiliency. That's a lot. And a 78% reduction in stress and burnout. They're related. Now, these people were at fever pitch. Well, you know what it's like. hospitals, healthcare. I think that's impressive. And there were lots of other statistics. They had a 50% ability to solve their personal problems. They never talked about personal problems. Personal problems were not on the radar of the program. It was work. And yet they also had a 50% increase in being able to deal with their own personal lives. This is an older study, but it's for the business-minded amongst us. They basically trained 800 people across the organisation and over 6 years. And they saw, and there's a sort of dissertation that gives you all the details, but they saw at the beginning up and down financial performance, by the end, high profit margins. They measured job satisfaction, massively increased. They're an engineering company, so productivity, cost of quality, savings of 27%. That's bottom line stuff, right? And they became, because in engineering they use world-class benchmarking standards, which are internationally recognised, they became one of those as a result of this. So just some data. Aaron Turner has done a lot of work, and I tell you who really has lots and lots of stories to tell in the area of business is Ken and Robin from Insight Principles. So I'll show you where to find out everything I'm telling you at the end. Now, this is big. This blew my mind. If you want to read one book, if you're in any kind of social change, working with police or traumatised people or gun crime or gang warfare, read the book Modelo, Dr. Jack Pransky. It was an idea that came slightly before its time. They won for this project. They won the Medal of Honor Award from Bill Clinton. Okay. After learning the principles, 87% of parents stated that their children were less hostile. Both the parents and the children learnt the principles, by the way. 85 to 90% of children and adolescents were involved in community. This had the highest crime in the county. The police wouldn't go in here, into Modelo. They wouldn't go in there. They got every kind of measure: attitude, self-esteem, grades, suspension, all the things that matter, increase. 45% decrease in violent crime. Gang warfare ended. For 10 years, 0 homicide. It had the highest rate in the county. How can that be? Because there's only one problem. Chronic mental stress. Or feeling bad and acting from it. Dr. George Pransky coined this a year and a half ago in Oslo, one solution. There is only one problem. Chronic mental stress, bad feeling, and not knowing where it's coming from. Misattributed to something else other than your thinking in the moment. And that misunderstanding is the source of all problems. You get residents in a state of distress. They take things to get rid of that bad feeling. That results in all sorts of a shit show. Then you get all sorts of other things that go wrong because you got drugs, you got gangs, right? And then you get crime. And then you get really upset police because they've got much more to do than they can cope with, and they get stressed about that because they also don't realise where their experience is coming from, which then you can see the vicious cycle here, can't you? And those of you that know about this world better than me, you'll recognise that. You'll know more than I will. But there's a solution, and it's the one we know about, which is the most awesome thing in the world. There is a solution. It's called understanding, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that, because my job here today is to join the dots in 1 minute. Can I have 2 minutes? No, 1 minute. Understanding that what creates chronic mental stress is everything we've been talking about today. We create it inside our own minds. And a deep and profound, personal, insightful, in your bones understanding, not intellectual, is the game changer. Understanding truth, I'm going to say. One Solution is an organisation dedicated to that. If you're a person who wants to change the world, check them out, because that's They believe that all of our experience comes from the mind. And when people understand that, we will live in peace. I'm not going to show you this because I haven't got time, but this is a project that I worked on. But what I will say is that these young people were homeless and ex-offenders, and now Zakia knows she's going to make it. She was on the streets. There's a resources library on here which has got, you go onto this website and you will be able to find everything you want today. That's what I've been up to. Me and a few others. This will link you up to the 3P Global Community. You just knock yourself out.